Alright everybody, we are back on the DK. This video here I'm going to talk about damage, different abilities and some ways that you can use them, macros, UI, add-ons, that sort of thing, and then just go over kind of a couple of pros and cons for the DK class. So as far as damage goes, basically what we're going to do, you're going to be using your Death Runes and your Frost Runes on Howling Blast. Your Unholy Runes are going to be used on Plague Strike, and then you're just going to use Frost Strike to dump runic power. Basically, you'll get it, just going through them like that. Make sure you're getting everything up, and use your runic power. You would use Frost Strike even without a Killing Machine proc, but obviously, if you can get the Killing Machine proc, that is better naturally. One thing you want to keep in mind as far as doing damage goes, never use Obliterate. Obliterate is worthless in PvP, and I will show you here. I got 9 seconds on KM proc, so 22.9 damage, K damage, 18,278 for damage. So there's Obliterate, 26k crit. Let's get another. There's a Frost Strike. Frost Strike, 50k crit. So Obliterate hits for about half of what a Frost Strike does. So basically, you're better off. And the other thing, Obliterate hits obviously only one target. You're better off using those runes on a Howling Blast and a Plague Strike. That'll help you stack Necrotic Plague, which will get more damage, and then the Howling Blast hits multiple targets, which will get you considerably more damage out there. And then plus the Frost Strike obviously does significantly more damage as well. So you're going to want to basically never use Obliterate. I hesitate to say never. I'm sure there's probably a situation out there that would warrant it, but I have yet to run across it. So as far as that goes, I mean, that's your basic damage rotation. There's nothing particularly complicated about it. As far as going defensive, your rotation is going to essentially be Death Siphon and Death Strike with Plague Leech, and then more Death Siphon. So you're going to use your Death Siphons for your 2 Unholy Runes, or excuse me, Death Siphon on your 2 Death Runes, and then Death Strike for your Frosted Unholy Runes. Then you'll use Plague Leech to pull your disease off and get 2 more Death Runes, which you'll then use on Death Siphon. So you'd have, and then you'll use Outbreak to get your disease up. So we got that, and then Death Siphon, Death Siphon, Death Strike, Death Strike, or Plague Leech, Death Siphon, and then by that time you're recharge, and you can do more of that, and then you can get your Frost Strikes, which will get your Runic Corruption procs, which means you can use more Death Siphons, more Death Strikes, and that sort of thing. I have found, honestly, that unless you are flag carrying or you're just getting severely trained into the ground, swapping to Blood Presence really doesn't help all that much for 2 reasons. First, Frost Presence increases your Runic Power generation, which means you're going to have more Frost Strikes, which means you're going to be getting those Runic Corruption procs more, which means, again, you're going to be using more Death Strikes, and more Death Siphons gets you more self-healing. Especially if you happen to be running a high versatility, that's going to help quite a bit. The other reason is because in Frost Presence, your Frost Strike is 25 runic power versus in Blood Presence, 40 runic power. Again, that's a pretty major difference. If you're sitting at a full RP bar, in Blood Presence, you'll get 2 Frost Strikes. In Frost Presence, you'll get 4. That's a pretty major difference. So in my experience, unless you're, like I said, unless you're flag carrying or you just keep getting trained into the ground, you get focused down by the whole team. Generally speaking, I stay in Frost Presence most of the time. And that's pretty much that. That's your basic damage rotation as far as PvP is going to be concerned. And then also, the mitigation rotation as far as Death Strike and Death Siphon goes. Coming up, I'll be talking about different abilities, a little more specifically some of your cooldowns and everything, Strangulates and Desecrated Ground and all that stuff. We'll get into those here in just a little bit, and then after that we'll go over macro UIs and add-ons and such. So there we go. Alright, here we are again. I'm going to talk about ability usage. This is going to be a lot of the cooldown based things. And just some general tips and ideas and things for these. One thing I want to say about them, right up front here, as far as your cooldowns and everything goes, you want to keep in mind that you can use these cooldowns both offensively and defensively. Virtually every cooldown you have is able to be used offensively and defensively, which I'll talk about a little bit. Plague Strike I touched on a little bit already in the damage section. You can use it obviously defensively to get more death runes, so you can death siphon more often. One way you can use it offensively is tab targeting to a different target, pulling your disease off of that target, and getting a couple of death runes back, which you can then use on Howling Blast, get you a little more spread damage, a little more pressure. And when you're running in an RBG, pulling your disease off of one target in order to get diseases stacking higher on 9 other targets, if you're in a team fight, 7 or 8 other targets, is usually worth the trade. So that's a good one there. Plague Leech, that's a very good talent to have. Next one, Pillar of Frost. This is going to be your damage cooldown. As far as dual wield goes, it's pretty much your only damage cooldown. If you happen to be running the on use trinket, you're going to macro those together. Just pop those and you'll get both of them together. That's pretty much what you got. Just use it on cooldown. It's got a 1-minute cooldown, so it lines up pretty well with a lot of other cooldowns from other classes. Pretty straightforward there. Not particularly complicated. Desecrated Ground. A lot of DKs run this. Personally, I think it's the better choice for RBGs, which I already kind of touched on in the talent section. Again, it's basically another trinket. Nothing too complicated about it. One thing to remember is it does put an area on the ground, so it's not always possible, but if you can manage to stay in that area, again, you can't be CC'd again. So that's a very, very useful thing to keep in mind. Icebound Fortitude. Again, this is another one that can be used both offensively and defensively. Obviously, breaking stun effects and reducing damage taken. Reducing damage taken, again, defensively, if you're getting trained really hard, if you're having to heal a lot, can be very useful there. Or offensively, if you're going against, say, a rogue or a DK running Asphyxiate instead of Strangulate, or paladins, any class with a stun, you can actually use this for 8 seconds worth of stun immunity, which is incredible. Very, very useful if you're going for a kill, if you're going for, just pumping out damage and you need that extra time on target. You can pop that offensively, and being immune to stun effects for that 8 seconds is pretty powerful. I'm going to skip Dark Sim for a minute. AMS, again, another one that you can use offensively and defensively. Most people are going to use this one defensively. I personally tend to use it defensively most of the time, but you can use it offensively as well. Defensively, as I'm sure everyone knows, absorbing magic damage for 8 seconds. They did change it so it absorbs 100% of magic damage instead of only part of the magic damage, which is really, really nice. And then preventing application of magic effects. This includes DK diseases, things, like the necrotic plagues and all that, which is annoying if you're playing a DK and he pops AMS, but when you're on your DK, it's a very useful thing to have. In order to use it offensively, you'll notice that the second sentence there, damage absorbed generates unit power. So again, when you're bursting on someone, if you pop your damage cooldowns and AMS, if there's any kind of AoE damage going out, towards your team, you're going to gain runic power from that, which just gives you more chance for frost strikes. You can dump into Killing Machine, which is going to be faster rune regeneration. We've gone over this before. It's a very cyclical rotation there. So that's one way to use that offensively as well. Very, very handy. Empower Rune Weapon. This is a very useful one. Obviously, it's going to be one of your major damage cooldowns. When you pop Pillar of Frost, you're usually going to want to pop Empower Rune Weapon along with it. Just make sure when you do that all of your runes are on cooldown. And if you can, use at least one Frost Strike before you pop it too, since it does generate runic power. If you happen to have it glyphed to heal, it's also a very useful healing cooldown. Again, something you can use defensively. Or even if it's not glyphed to heal you, it's still useful defensively because you're going to get your runes back. You can use those for death strikes and for death siphons and help you stay alive. So again, another thing that you can use offensively and defensively. Very, very useful there. As far as Strangulate goes, personally, I prefer to run Strangulate. It is on a 1 minute cooldown, which is annoying, and it takes a blood rune, it takes a death rune in this case. But it is a very useful cooldown. The RBG team I run with, we tend to have quite a lot of stuns, but not as many silences, so I'll run this because it's another silence. It's very handy to have, especially if you can use it with a focus macro, which I'll talk about here in a minute, on a healer. And that's pretty much that. Obviously, Chains of Ice, very useful. Death Grip. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. If you have the 2-piece bonus, using Death Grip immediately before you pop your damage cooldowns, getting that 25% damage on... you're going to want to use that on a Killing Machine Frost Strike. If you can get that, though, that'll help you quite a bit using, on your damage cooldowns and everything. Very, very handy to have like that as well. So, Top Bear doing that. And that, looking at 66k, not too bad right there. So that's very, very useful. And let's see, am I missing anything? Soul Reaper, my personal opinion, I don't care too much for Soul Reaper. I would prefer to have just a normal execute ability. But this is what we have. The timing on it can be a little bit tricky. Especially if you happen to be bursting down one of the enemy healers. You have to kind of learn your team and how fast your team can DPS things as to when to apply it. But if you can get it to, go for that full 5 seconds and get that damage effect off, very, very useful, very powerful ability. But it is a little bit tricky to use. So it's a little bit of a learning curve there, but it's a useful ability to have. Okay, and the next ability I want to talk about is the one that it really makes or breaks a DK, Dark Simulacrum. It's a difficult one to understand, even more difficult to use effectively, but this is really what differentiates a good DK from a great DK. I will say in a rated battleground, it's not as useful as it would be in arenas, mainly because you've got, 19 other players in the rated battleground, and sometimes you're not able to let an enemy get a spell cast off in order to copy it. But it can be very useful. So Dark Sim, obviously 8 seconds triggers when that enemy next spends mana on a spell. That's a very important factor right there. If they don't spend mana, it's completely worthless. So casting Dark Sim on a rogue, on a warrior, on another DK, completely worthless. One exception to that is you can cast it on a DK who has copied a spell, and you will copy that spell. For example, if I'm running with a Resto Druid and an enemy DK puts Dark Sim on my Resto Druid and copies a Cyclone, for example. If I notice that and then I put Dark Sim on the enemy DK and he casts his Cyclone, my Dark Sim will copy the Cyclone from that DK. Kind of neat to know. Not the most useful thing in the world to know. It's really, really tricky to get the timing right. But it's kind of fun to do if you can get the timing right. As far as the rest of it goes, pretty straightforward stuff. Just, you can copy, like it says, anything that requires mana. The most useful things to copy are going to be crowd control. Cyclone, like I said, polymorph, stuns, that sort of thing. Hex, any kind of crowd control is going to be the most useful thing to copy. But you can also copy, for example, Ice Block and Divine Shield. Not the most useful things in the world to copy, but they are a lot of fun. One thing to note is that when you copy a spell, it does not copy the glyphs that come with it. So, for example, if a mage has their Ice Block glyphed to heal them, and you copy it, it will not heal you. It does not copy that glyph. But it is still kind of fun just to have the Ice Block there and go ahead and block and, annoy everyone with it. So, again, a very useful ability, very difficult to master, but very, very, very useful if you can get it timed correctly. And again, in a rated battleground, it's not as useful, simply because you've got 9 other players on your team who are probably going to be watching whatever target you're on, or whatever target you're watching, and they may be kicking whatever whatever spell that you want to be copying. The other downside is, in order for you to copy the spell, they have to finish the cast. So in order for you to copy a Cyclone, for instance, someone on your team has to get Cycloned, which isn't always a good thing for you. Sometimes it's better to go ahead and kick that spell and avoid the CC against your team. So it is a very interesting spell. It can be a very, very useful spell, but again, takes a lot of practice and a lot of experimentation to get everything right with it. Alright, now I'm going to talk about macros, UI, add-ons, that sort of thing. First thing I want to talk about as far as this is concerned is this is pretty much all personal preference. It's something that you're going to want to consider your own play style and whether you want certain things in certain places. Like for me, example, I have my character here, target here, that sort of thing. I put my focus target right above it like that so I can see doing that. But it depends. Some people prefer to have focus target up here. Some people keep their character and portrait, higher up on the screen. It's fine. It's all, whatever works best for you. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. The mods that I'm using, in no particular order, my unit frames mod, I guess, is Z-Pearl. Personally, I prefer this one. I've been using it since it was X-Pearl way back in the day. Now it's changed developers, and it's Z-Pearl. I got Bartender here. I think Bartender is pretty popular mod. Most people use it. And then I have my nameplates mod here. Is called I don't know how you pronounce it. QE plates. It's KUI nameplates. If you're looking on Curse. I was having some frame rate issues with tidy plates, so I had to stop using tidy plates, and I got this one, and honestly, I like this one better. It just feels better. It feels smoother to use. Personally, I'm liking it better. It's a lot. It's just as simple to set up, and it works great, and it's updated enough that I don't have frame rate issues. So if you have issues like that, maybe you want to look into this one, something like that. And if not, go ahead and keep using tidy plates. Tidy plates is a fantastic add-on as well. And then let's see, as far as the rest go, this one here is Tell Me When. It's pretty simple. I use it, basically just to keep track of my major cooldowns. My burst cooldown and my strangulate are the only two that I use it for. In my opinion, they're the two most important cooldowns that I have. The rest of them I can just kind of look down on my bar here and see where the counter is. But these two I have set up so that it'll show me, and it actually plays a sound whenever they come off cooldown. So very useful mod there. You can also set it up. It's very customizable. You can set it up so that it puts a big big icon right in the middle of your screen, something like that. So just depends on how you want to use it. Let's see, as far as the rest of the mods go, you can't see it here, actually. Battleground targets, you can't see it here. I think I'm in combat, so I'm probably in combat. Do anything here. There we go. That noise you heard, actually, was Tell Me When, telling me that these are ready. Battleground targets, highly recommend this one. It'll put your enemy targets and your friendly targets up on your screen. Very, very useful in Battlegrounds. You can set it up to use, obviously roll. Realm's not all that useful. That was just the default that it came with. Trinkets, who has the flag, that sort of thing. Same with friendly players and 15 mans, 10 mans. Very useful there, especially if you're target calling. It helps you keep track of who's used their trinket, what spec everyone is, where everyone's at, that sort of thing. So very, very useful mod right there. And that's pretty much it as far as mods go. Not a whole lot else to talk about with them. They're fairly basic. And you can find, I get all my mods from Curse, but there's a lot of them, wowinterface.com and all that sort of thing too. So that's that. As far as macros go, not a whole lot of macros for a Dual-Wield Frost DK. You're going to be using, I mean, your burst macro is two things really. We don't use Breath of Cindergo, so that's still there from back when I was two-hand frost. In fact, I can go ahead and get rid of that. There's no point now there. So really Pillar of Frost and your unused trinket if you have it. That's going to be your burst macro. Having a kick macro. I use a lot of modifiers here, so your focus kick, and a normal kick. This is the macro I use for Obliterate. You can probably see these here. And then the same with Icy Touch, which is that one. This one's a little bit more complicated. I put the start attack in there so that it automatically starts my character attacking. And then I can cast Icy Touch at a focus target. Shift is a regular Icy Touch, and then Howling Blast. The reason I have this one here is on the off chance that I ever do start running the Glyph of Icy Touch again, I can go ahead and use that either on my current target or on my focus target. And then the same one here, a Focus Silence macro are for Strangulate. Pretty straightforward there, nothing too complicated. Same thing, Grip, Alt at Focus exists, Death Grip, otherwise just normal Grip. Don't use that one a whole lot, but it's good to have. Same here. Frost Strike, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure why I have that one. Dark Simulacrum, again, using as a shift modifier to go on the focus target. This is a good one, having Stance macro, lets you just trigger use one key to trigger your Stancing. You can add Unholy Presence in here. As Frost, as Dual-Wield Frost, Unholy Presence is not really all that necessary. But I mean, if it's something you want to do, you can go ahead and do it. There's nothing that says you can't. And then the last one here is the one I use for my trinket. This is, since I'm human, I'm running Everman from Self, obviously. And then on the modifier, I'm using Witchbone for that. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. You've got Gorfien's Grasp. Oh, this is a good one to mention. I think I mentioned this in the talent section, but I'll mention it here again. The base talent for this row is called Grip of Death. So if you were to change out, for example, to Gorfien's Grasp instead of Desecrating them, it'll automatically change the macro. So you don't have to actually change the macro if you just use Grip of Death like that. Pretty handy there. Obviously, using the shift macro doesn't do anything for you as far as Desecrated Ground goes. But if you do switch over to Gorfien's, it's kind of useful for that. That way, it'll cast it on your target. If you happen to be, if you happen to be meleeing your target, it'll pull everything to where your target is. You can also add a alt modifier here, or any modifier you want, and cast it on yourself. You would use @player in that case, and it'll pull everything to where you are instead of where your target is. So, just depends on how you want to handle it. That's a kind of a useful one there as well. And that's pretty much it as far as UI and macros and everything goes. Frost is fairly straightforward as far as all that stuff goes. And I'll just kind of skip right into pros and cons of Frost. Personally, I find Frost to be considerably more fun than two-hand. Don't get me wrong, two-hand's a fun spec. I do like it, but I'm glad that they're sticking with Dual-Wield Frost. It's a spec that I've been playing for quite a while and I quite enjoy. It's some of its advantages. It's going to have, between Howling Blast and Necrotic Plague, it's going to have quite a bit more spread pressure than two-hand. Or let me rephrase that. It's going to have more easily spread pressure. It's basically your main rotation is just going to automatically spread the pressure out there. Whereas with something else, if you're running multiple dots, you have to worry about putting up a Plague Strike. In this case, Plague Strike just stacks up another stack of another stack of Necrotic Plague. So that's a good one. That's a lot of fun. And then it's almost all frost damage, which is actually a good thing and a bad thing. It's good because in certain cases, for example, say a paladin bops himself, all of our damage pretty much goes through bop, with the exception of Plague Strike and Death Strike. Everything we do goes through a bop. Even Mind Freeze, you can actually kick a cast through a bop. That's a very, very useful thing. I think I actually may have forgotten to mention that in the abilities section. But I remember to put that in here. But yeah, all of our damage goes through a Bob, through a Blessing of Protection. Or excuse me, now it's Hand of Protection. But that's a good thing there. The downside is if they do have, you know, an immunity somehow to frost damage, you don't have a whole lot of physical damage except for Plague Strike. I guess you can Obliterate, even though, like we said, its damage is significantly lower than Frost Strike's. Which, that's another possible con, is Dual-Wield is going to have less physical damage, so you're going to be stacking a lot of Mastery, that sort of thing, which I already mentioned in the stats section. So less physical damage, more magical damage. So if you know, if you get someone who's immune to magical damage, maybe with one of the Paladin's Hand of I don't remember what it's called. It's the same tier as Clemency for a Paladin. But if they have that, you know, magic damage thing there, that's gonna make life a little difficult for you. But overall, it's a very, very fun spec. Very effective when you pair it with Warlocks, Shadow Priests. You want to, you know, if you're running a rock comp, what they call a spread damage comp, especially in RBGs, can be very effective with that. Just as effective actually as Unholy. It's a very, very useful spec there. So I mean, that's pretty much it. That's what we got here for this guide. If you have any comments, please do let me know. Make a comment down there in the comments section. Go ahead and like and share the video. Show it to everyone you can. And if you have any questions or anything, please do. Again, leave a comment down there and let me know. I'll be watching it, and I'll respond to anything I can. So have a good one, everyone, and happy frost striking.